Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast from Washington, D.C. I've got Oliver Fernandez, and he is a contractor. He's in the construction business. He's the podcast host of the Construction Game with Oliver Fernandez, where he educates his audience around construction, contractors, real estate. He's got a very interesting story, which I'm going to have him share with the audience, and really happy to have him on. So, Oliver, welcome.
Hey, I'm super excited to be here with you guys today. And yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be real fun.
Yeah. Briefly introduce yourself and, talk about, how you got in. I know you were in business in 2008 and 2012 and how you got into what you're doing now.
Yeah. So right now we're a government contractor, and, becoming a government contractor was really interesting. We started off in the construction game being like a subcontractor. So we would work for the general contractors, and we had this project that was down in Tampa, Florida, and we were working on the connection between Tampa, Florida and Orlando, I-4. And we were widening that highway for the general contractor. And we were working our butts off. I mean, we were putting in all the blood, sweat, and energy, the same level of effort we're doing now, we were doing then. And I was just looking up and looking at the numbers, and it's like, man, we're like barely surviving. Like, why is this happening? And at the same time, somebody was making money in that scenario, and it just wasn't us. And it was the general contractor. So at that point, I made a commitment to wanting to be the general contractor, working directly for the client, handling all of the questions and the RFIs and the submittals that would need to be addressed. And that's when we made the shift and moving down the road of being a general contractor. And it sounds much easier than it really was. I mean, there was a lot of pain and a lot of turmoil transitioning from being a subcontractor to a general contractor. Some of that turmoil was like, we had gotten the subcontract business $500,000 in the hole before we transitioned over to being a general contractor. So we had to, overcome all of that debt, which was, at the time for me was monumental, because I hadn't even personally taken six figures out of the company, and all of a sudden we were at $500,000 in the hole. And also it's just a different mindset. Now all of a sudden we have to connect with the clients. I had to, become a person that was more outgoing. At the time I was very introverted and, was behind the scenes. Whereas now I had to become extroverted and get in front of people and present my product and tell them what I could do for them and how we could, help them. And that was a huge, internal shift that needed to happen. And over the course of a year, we were calling all kinds of contracting officers, which are the people that, issue the contracts for the government. And, after calling hundreds and hundreds and going to site visits and traveling to all the site visits and constantly pitching my business, we landed our first project. It was down in Sanibel Island, Florida, for the Fish and Wildlife. It was a $500,000 job. And we took that project and we went back to everybody that we've been calling, and we started telling them about all the things we were doing down there. And now all of a sudden we had past performance. And all of a sudden we were able to secure another $800,000 job up in DC, $2.6 million job in Albany, Georgia, $800,000 job for the Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, and then another $800,000 job for the USDA in Gainesville, Florida. And, I say all of that because it was, there's so much growth that had to happen during that time. And, when you put your head down and you really put the work in and you have, tunnel vision on the things that you really want, you can make any of that a reality.
Yeah, very inspiring story. And so we'll dive into the questions because you're the McKinsey Construction. And so a lot of people listening to this is, why McKinsey?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So when I was graduating from college, which was 2008, my dad had given me a call literally a couple of weeks before my graduation. He's like, "Hey son, I'm going out of business, and we had the same name, and he's like, "Hey, can I put the business in your name?" And I was like, "Yeah, you can put the business in my name." I wanted him to still be able to take care of my 3 sisters. So I was like, "Yeah, let's put the business in my name and let's make money together." And at the time, I didn't even really care what the name was. It wasn't really my business. It wasn't anything that I really cared about from a standpoint of like naming it. So my dad selected the name McKenzie Construction, and then I was telling you the story. We got $500,000 in the hole, and like I had to literally take over the reins of the business, and basically tell my dad that like he wasn't making any more decisions for the business anymore, and I wasn't be the one making the decision for the business at that point. And it was a really difficult situation from the standpoint of like I had to now all of a sudden stand up to my dad, a guy that I looked up to my entire life, stand up to him and tell him, get in the back seat, or go in your own direction. And he ended up deciding to go in his own direction. Well, like, I had to grow so much. And, I was, when I first really got into it, I was like, man, I want to change this name. And like, it doesn't mean anything to me. But like, after putting so much time, energy, and effort in building the business and, securing the contracts required to be able to pay back the business, it was almost like being in the desert, and I'd been beaten up so bad, and I was bleeding out of my eyes, my nose, and I was basically sleeping in trees because I was left to figure it out all on my own, and then all of a sudden I had this little baby in my hand with McKenzie, and like now I look at it, and I get so much pride saying like, yeah, McKenzie Construction, because it comes from a point of like, I had this baby in my hand, and we made it. We made it through all of those really tough times. And now, we've done over $100 million worth of construction projects successfully. And we've actually just signed we just went over our $200 million signed contract. So I say all of that to say that, McKenzie is I looked up the definition of McKenzie, and it's like being born through the fire. And man, having that baby in my hand, McKenzie, and being born through the fire. Everything that you see and you hear from me right now, my tempo, the way I speak, the way I can connect with people that are looking to buy my services, all of that was born through that fire. And that's the definition of the name, and that's how we got to McKenzie.
Interesting. And so you have over 100 plus projects completed, and it looks like these are large scale construction, 200 million plus in over 16 years. So what for people that they wanted to partner or work with you, what kind of project do you complete or do you usually do?
Right. So we typically go after government projects. So the government is the owner of the building, and they are anywhere between $1 and $10 million. So what does that look like? It could be like a fitness center renovation on like a military base, right? So we'll go in, renovate the fitness center. We'll take down the ceilings, change out all the mechanical systems, all the electrical, all the plumbing, and then put back all the new finishes, like the walls, the ceiling tile, the fitness center flooring, and then paint the place. And all of a sudden there's a full gut renovation of that fitness center. We've renovated air traffic control towers. We've renovated runways. So like there's a couple of runways that we've gone on to, and there's broken concrete. I met this guy, and he's like, and there's always two types of concrete. There's concrete that's broken, and then there's concrete that's gonna break or crack. There's cracked concrete, or there's concrete that's gonna crack. So like this cracked concrete, we go in there and we take it out, and we pour back new concrete on the airfields. And all of those projects range between $1 and $10 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So it looks like just large scale government. And so the next question I have for you is with these if you created a podcast as well, which is the construction game with Oliver Fernandez, and talk about why you incorporated a podcast into it, and what in the goals and who you're trying to reach.
Right. So the reason why I originally created the podcast was I wanted to get my ability to communicate up, right? So I've always been a shy kid, and I developed the skill set to be able to like call people and get on the phone and like talk one-on-one, but I still was really quiet, and I didn't have my voice developed. And what I mean by that is like when somebody would want to have a conversation, I would give like a 1 or 2 word answer, and it was just like very blah. So I wanted to really develop that, but at the same time, I wanted to be able to help other contractors, because I remember when I was in that spot where I just needed to have the path clarified for me, and I didn't have it clarified for me, and I had to like bump my head so many times and do the wrong thing so many times. And I wanted that to be clarified, and that was the real purpose of me, creating that podcast, is to be able to help subcontractors that are experienced and they can do between $1 and $5 million, and they want to grow and scale their business to like $20 million and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Well, I found because there are not very many contractors that have a podcast, so it's really interesting to see that. And follow-up question I have for you is, with what sort of challenges are specific to the contracting business that you don't find elsewhere?
Yeah, so contractors have the same problems that a lot of people have, right? And one of the problems that I found myself in was like, I wanted to control everything. Growing up, there was always people saying that they were going to help, and then I didn't get the help. So like when I had my first opportunities, I literally would do everything to get them to the finish line, because that's just what was ingrained in me at the time. And then that's how, and then the problem with that is that it creates this pattern, and all of a sudden you're trying to do everything all by yourself. And the problem with that is that you prevent yourself from scaling. So you can't scale when there's only 24 hours in a day. So like, yeah, we could do a lot of projects, and we got to, right around $10 million a year with me pouring everything that I had into the business, working like 20-hour days. We got to $10 million, but like to get to where we're at now, $40 million, and then what we're going to do this year, $80 million, there's no possible way that I've ever gotten to that by just me doing everything. So, contractors are notorious for wanting to control everything and do everything. And at the same time, what they fail to realize is that that's the actual thing that holds them back from taking their business from where it's currently at to where they want it to be. And honestly, that goes for everybody. If you want to control everything, your growth is going to be limited. But if you can let go of some control, then you start to allow your ability to grow, to expand.
Yeah. Interesting. What are the top 3 traps to avoid as a contractor?
Yeah. So when we're contractors, like a lot of times what we do is that we chase after everything, right? And one of the things that I have gotten a lot of value with in my own business, and I literally hired a coach, and literally they brought me through this whole process. They're like, "Hey, Oliver, what's your best client?" And I was like, they're all my best client. But he's like, no, Oliver, like, who's your best client? Like, who do you love doing business with? Who do you make the most money with? Like, who's your best client? And I was like, okay, the Navy's my best client. Okay. And he's like, okay, well, where are you working at with the Navy? I'm like, oh, we're mainly working at the Navy down in the southeast region of the United States. So we're working with them in Florida and Georgia and a little bit in South Carolina. And then you're like, okay, well, is there any other Navy installations around? And it's like, I'm like, yeah, they're all over the United States. There's some up in the Northeast. There's some on the West Coast. There's some down in Texas. They're all over. And he's like, why are you going after them? I was like, I don't know why. So, so that's, one of the traps is like, we like to stay in our bubble, and like, that's not where growth is. That's not where the opportunity is. Like, you have to go to the opportunity. I'm from Maine, but like I live here in Washington, D.C. I've done work in Mississippi, Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina. I've been to places that I never, ever dreamed of going. And then I'm not saying they're the nicest places, but they're places where we can go in and make money. And we're there because we've gone to the opportunity. So, as a contractor, you want to do business with everybody, but a lot of times doing business with everybody doesn't pay. So you want to do business with the people that pay and that you do enjoy and that you do have, that you can build a business. So that's one. Number two is you got to go with opportunities. And then number three is you can't do everything on your own. Most contractors don't do everything on their own. You can't do everything on your own. Just to even give a glimpse of what our team looks like is we got a finance team. When we first started out, it was Oliver doing all of the bookkeeping. It was Oliver making sure, submitting our invoices to get paid. It was Oliver receiving all the invoices from our subcontractors and then releasing and signing the checks for when we needed to pay them. We got our estimating team, which is our team that goes after our opportunities that we go after, and that's kind of like sales and marketing, because they also do our brochures and our technical proposals that we need to submit along with our pricing, right? And then we got our operations team. Like after you get the business, then what? You got to execute on this stuff, and like that's really what drives revenue. You can right now we have a backlog of $80 million, but that backlog of $80 million doesn't pay any of the bills right now. What pays the bills right now is us going out there and the operation team executing on those projects, and then that's where we generate the money to pay the bills.
Interesting. I know we have around 5-7 minutes remaining, and the other question I have for you is, you talked about this idea, and you talked about this. What are the 4 seasons of business?
Yeah. I mean, business is and life is like this for a lot of us, and a lot of us, we don't really even look at it in this way, and we're in a season that we don't think we're in, and then all of a sudden we're doing activities in that season which actually should have been done in another season. And what I mean by that is like we got summer, right? And what does summer mean? Like summer means or spring. Let's start with spring. So what does spring mean? Like spring means we just got out of the winter, and we gotta make our ground ready for harvest. So like we're tilling the ground, and we're planting our seeds, right? So that's like for me in the construction business, or for you as a business owner, you're going out there and you're making connections, you're submitting your proposals, you're putting bids out into the marketplace for people to say yes or no to, right? So last year, for example, was our biggest year yet. But last year also was the biggest year that we planted the most amount of seeds, right? So like, your growth in the amount of seeds that you're planting are also correlated, right? So we planted a lot of seeds last year, over $1 billion worth of projects we bid, and we secured over, $66 million worth of projects. And so that's spring, right? So that's season number 1, spring. And then summer, summer is hot out, it's nobody wants to work, but like are you going to still work? Are you still going to, take the activities that are required to keep moving your business forward? It's hot, sweaty, people are quitting on you. If you're a business owner, you know all about that, especially in the construction industry. People are quitting, all the excuses and the reasons are popping up, but like, are you still moving the business forward? Right. That's summer. That's summer for you, right? And then after summer comes fall, right? And fall is harvest season. So like we got the harvest, right? And the harvest season will be good if you took the activities required of you in spring and in summer, right? But the harvest will be poor if you didn't take the right activities in spring and summer. And honestly, I never focused on the harvest. All I can focus on the things that I can control, and that is the things that I'm doing in the spring, where I'm planting my seeds, calling my customers, submitting my bids, planting my seeds all over the place, right? And then watering those seeds. They're reaching out. Hey, we got questions on this, or hey, we need some more information here. We need you to break down your proposal more. All those things. Some people might get annoyed by that. I'm like, yeah, we're right on the same path. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. We've left spring, now we're in summer, right? And then that brings you to fall, where now all of a sudden it's time to reap the harvest. And last year we secured over $66 million worth of projects. And to put that in context, so I was in business for 10 years, and and we did over $100 million worth of projects. So 10 years took me to do $100 million worth of projects. And then in 1 year, because we focused on the team, decided we weren't going to do everything on our own. We focused on who our real client was. And then we went to the opportunities. Now, all of a sudden, we did $66 million, secured $66 million worth of business in 1 year. So it just, goes to show how fast you can grow when you got the right things moving for you in the right way.
Interesting. Yeah, always be planting seeds, and so I know one question I have for you is because I see your social media and you're doing a lot of inspirational talks and speaking, and you got a podcast, becoming more of a thought leader and influencer. And so, with your, you mentioned we only have 24 hours. So what are the top 3 ways construction companies can grow massive?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to the basics. I've done a lot of business coaching, and honestly, the thing that's helped me the most was like taking the business coaching that I've actually gotten consumed and actually applied it, sometimes we get into this entertainment thing where we're going consuming all this information and we're getting entertained by it. But like the entertainment doesn't change your life. It's kind of like the football games that were going on yesterday. Like, yes, they're great. Yes, there's some really cool plays that were going on. But like, if you really ask me, like, hey, how'd the game go? Like, I wouldn't be able to answer any of the questions for you because I wasn't watching it, because it's entertainment and like doesn't impact my life. So I got to focus on the things that are going to impact my life. And that's one of the things to grow massive. We gotta stay focused on the things that are going to have an impact, right? And a lot of that just flows back to what we were saying before. And it's like figuring out who your real customer is and really dialing that customer in. And then also, finding the opportunity and going to the opportunity. When I was first starting out, and right after we had landed that $500,000 job in Sanibel Island, Florida, we wanted more projects, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get more projects. And we had an opportunity to go up to Albany, Georgia, to do another capability briefing. And what that basically is basically a meeting that you get to meet with the contracting officer, and sometimes there's other people in the meeting, like other contractors that are also looking to get business. And I basically left out of Tampa. I was living in Tampa at the time, and I left out of Tampa at 3:00 in the morning. It was like a 7-hour drive. So I make the drive up, and I get there. I go through the badging, because you have to get badged in to go into all these military bases. So I go through the badging, and I get there and I sit down at the table, and this little Southern lady walks in the door, and I'm like, hey. And she's like, hey. She's like, nice to meet you. I'm like, nice to meet you. She's like, you're the only one that showed up today. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, everybody else called out and canceled. There was a tornado warning that was coming through the area. And I was like, what? Tornado warning? Like, I was definitely not worried about our tornado warning. Like, we had just landed a first $500,000 job, but I was in the hole of $500,000. I was not watching the news. I was not worried about a tornado. I was willing to do whatever it took to get my business out of that hole. And that meeting ended up being the meeting that we landed our first $2.6 million contract from. And you got to go where the opportunity is. I wasn't just sitting in my office. Because at the time I was living in my office. I had my desk here, and then had my futon over here, $500,000 in the hole, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I wasn't just sitting in my office, just wondering and wishing and hoping. I went to the opportunity, and the opportunity ended up presenting itself that time. But there was a lot of other meetings that I went to that, I didn't get that same contract, but I just kept staying after it and didn't get distracted from where we wanted to go. And then, another thing too is, I can't explain enough how important developing a team is. I have been a person that was willing to do whatever it took, and I used to literally do the bookkeeping and all of the sales. So we would go out there and estimate all the projects. Then I would get the projects done. But I realized that my business was going up and down and up and down and up and down. I'm wondering why my business is going up and down. Well, looking back at it now, it's obvious why my business was going up and down. my business was going up and down because I would go out there and be estimating a bunch of projects and I'd secure them. Then I'd go down there and I'd start getting the projects done. And yes, I was generating revenue, but I didn't have a backlog anymore. Right. So then I'd burn down all my backlog and then I'd have to go back out there and get new business again. And then I'd burn down my backlog and then I'd go out there and get new business again. So it's just this roller coaster ride. Whereas now we have it set up where we're constantly bidding projects while the operations team is constantly executing on projects. And, I guess the real way I learned that is we had this project where we were installing some fence and we ended up getting into a bunch of back and forth and there were some issues with the project. And, we were doing whatever it took to get this one to the finish line. So I was boots on the ground in terms of like project managing this thing. And I was like full focused on execution and getting this project to the finish line. At the same time, we had an estimator, and that estimator was continuing to bid projects. And I was literally head into the sand, like doing whatever it takes to get this project to the finish line, because there was a lot of issues and it was a very intricate, it was a very delicate project. So once that project was done and over, I was like, oh, finally, we're done. We finally got that one to the finish line. And I was like, man, I got to run this next sprint. Like, we're going to have to get more work. But at the same time, I realized that the estimator that we had secured like $10 million worth of business while I was like scrapping and clawing to get this project to the finish line. And I'm like, this is what we got to like build out of our full routine. Like, we got to constantly be going after projects on the bidding side, and then we got to constantly be going after projects on the execution side. And that's where we created this system where now it's like we got wheels that are always moving forward.
Interesting. How can people find out more about you and reach out to you, learn more about you, and check out your podcast?
Yeah, you can connect with me at my podcast. It's the Construction Game Podcast with Oliver Fernandez. You can also connect with me on Instagram, Oliver Fernandez 3. And you can also, if you want, you can email me at Oliver@McKenzie, McKenzie, abbreviation for construction, const.com.
Awesome. Really cool. Really interesting conversation around scaling and teams and, personal development, and keep up the great work.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. Looking forward to it. I love what you're doing.